Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Most of us have heard of superfoods, and we've heard that they are very beneficial to our health and that we should include them in our daily diet for overall wellness. And this is certainly true, but we really want to understand why that is. Clearly, we know that superfoods have a common value to them. They are nutrient rich. They are packed with powerful antioxidants, vitamins and minerals, essential fatty acids, healthy proteins, good carbohydrates, a lot of different things that we know that the body really needs in order to function properly. I want to focus specifically today on a transcription factor known as NRF2 or NRF2. It is commonly shortened to. And we know that this is really important because it activates the transcription of over 500 genes in the human genome. And most of those genes that it's activating have these cytoprotective functions. So what does that mean? Cellular protection functions. So when we look at different antioxidants that we can obtain from our foods, and then we look at that activation of NRF2, which is helping with that regulation of those over 500 different genes, then we can start to put those pieces together. And the science behind the actual role of NRF2 when it comes to oxidative stress, when it comes to toxicity in the body, is really quite impressive. So I want to talk a little bit about that today in the setting of superfoods. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and let's get right to it. Let's talk about reactive oxygen species. We know we often call these free radicals, but they can do significant damage at a cellular level, and they're constantly generated within the body from internal metabolism, but also from external sources as well. So we know that there's different pollutants in the air, there's pesticides on food, all the different chemicals that are put into processed foods, for example, and we know that these can certainly create havoc when it comes to cellular detoxification. And as these antioxidants that we obtain from superfoods can help to offset the negative effects of those reactive oxygen species. That's why we look at superfoods as being so incredibly important, especially when we are thinking about our diet and what we are taking in on a regular basis. You may think that you're eating something healthy, but if it's containing additional ROSs, reactive oxygen species, then maybe it's not so great for you. So this is why I want to do just kind of an introduction to superfoods and really highlight the NRF2 component to that. Because when we look at the different phases of metabolic detoxification, we know that NRF2 plays an incredibly important role in this. And so NRF2 actually stands for nuclear factor erythroid 2, and it is a member of these transcription factors. We know that it plays this really integral role in terms of managing these reactive oxygen species that are either created in the body or that we are exposed to from an external source. So if we can have foods that we know help in terms of the activation of NRF2, then that's really a very good thing. Now, we've been able to narrow this down through scientific research, all of the different natural compounds that have a really finite ability to help to enhance NRF2 activation. So when we look at the things that are coming from cruciferous vegetables, for example, when we look at berries, when we look at curcumin, all of these things are ways in which the NRF2 transcription factor can actually be enhanced and activated. And all of this is very important because we know that NRF2 is not only a master regulator when it comes to detoxification, but it also plays a very important role as an anti-inflammatory and as this cytoprotective mechanism in which it brings about all of these positive effects in the human body. So if we can target what is going wrong in the body with foods, then that's always a good thing. And this is why when we look at NRF2 activation, we can start to identify the different foods that we certainly know can be beneficial. So I wanted to talk about superfoods today in particular. And when we think about superfoods, this kind of encompasses across the board many different individual foods, but also classes of foods. So we think about seeds and nuts, for example. We can look at, specifically, say, pecans or pecan, depending upon where in the country you live. But we know that these are very healthy in the setting that they have good, healthy fat spectrum to them. And we also know that they have a really nice broad spectrum of vitamins and minerals in them as well, which is why they have been looked upon as being the superfood for heart health, for example. So, we can also look at scientific studies that look at almonds or look at walnuts, and we can see the spectrum of this nutrient-rich ability of these foods and why that's important when we start to delve into the way that the body actually is taking in those nutrients and those antioxidants that are derived specifically from those foods. So garlic, for example, onions, we know that these have a high amount of naturally occurring active constituents such as allicin with garlic or quercetin, for example, in onions. And we know that all of these things can help with that NRF2 transcription factor. And all of that is incredibly beneficial when we look at how it is that the NRF2 is working. And we know certainly that when it comes to the way that the body is managing different pathways, certainly NRF2 is a main control of that in terms of that stability within the human body. And I don't want to get too heavy into NRF2, but we know that there are even certain drugs, certain pharmacological agents that are targeting NRF2 to try and help with that activation, to help to offset the negative impacts of oxidative stress and damage going on at that cellular level. And we also know that there are other things out there that can actually impede or inhibit NRF2 activation. And the reason why we link superfoods to many components of our health is when you start to break down different disease states, different chronic diseases, for example, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, heart disease, liver disease, we see that this downregulation that occurs in the body and not enough of the NRF2 activation is occurring, then we see how much that's impacting these over 500 different genes. And if those genes aren't properly activated and working, then it makes it very difficult for the body to go through these different processes when it comes to detoxification and removal of toxins. Hence, we can end up with issues such as, toxicity. So we look at ways in which modern diets are deficient in nutrients, and the nutrients that really give and lend to an awful lot of natural NRF2 activation. So hence we look at the standard American diet, and we know that the standard American diet is not going to be high in the type of foods and those phenolic antioxidants that help when it comes to raising NRF2 levels in the body. So we have more of that activation of those many different genes, those hundreds of different genes in the body. So these are things that we know. We know that there are a number of chronic inflammatory diseases that certainly can lower NRF2's ability to activate those genes. And this can in turn exacerbate the potential symptoms of those different disease states. So there's a lot of different scientific studies. And like I said, I don't want to get too heavy into this because a lot of it can get relatively complicated real fast when we're looking at the different ROSs, the reactive oxygen species, for example, and looking at superoxide and looking at hydroxyl radicals and all of these things that we know can create significant damage within our cells and create kind of an imbalance within the DNA, within the nucleus of those cells, which is why having foods that are providing a good amount of these antioxidants to help to enhance that NRF2 is really so important. So we can look at things like avocados, for example. The reason why avocados are a superfood is not only are they packed with fiber and protein and healthy fats and vitamins and minerals, but we also know that the fatty acids within the avocados provide for optimal absorption of carotenoids. And this is one of those key areas of the scientific research right now when we look at NRF2 activation comes down to carotenoids. And if we have higher amounts of those carotenoids, this can really help to benefit those particular pathways when we're talking about detoxification, when we're talking about inflammation. So all of these different things. But the superfoods in general, we look at all these phytosterols and those plant-based antioxidants. It's not just limited to that. We know that we have, all of the mineral exposure, and many of these minerals are required for proper immune system function. For example, selenium and magnesium and zinc, we know are integral when it comes to immune function. Same thing when we're looking at vitamins. So the vitamins that we obtain from certain superfoods, such as, we'll just stick with avocados, vitamin C and vitamin E, these power antioxidants that really help to enhance not only that NRF2 transcription factor activation, but also when we just look at our innate and our adaptive immune systems that require all of these different vitamins and minerals. So there's a lot of heavy science behind the NRF2 activation. This has been, published in many widely read scientific journals, these peer-reviewed journals. The Oxidative Medicine and Cellular Longevity Journal was looking at those different activators and inhibitors of NRF2 and their potential for, different clinical development of future, whether it's pharmacological agents or really honing in on the actual foods. And all of this is certainly important when we look at the big scope of things with the state of health within the United States, but also throughout the world. We see chronic disease states on the rise, certainly not just limited here in the U.S. We see high numbers here in the U.S., but we are also seeing these patterns and these trends happening throughout the world. Now, part of that reason is because a lot of other places in the world are adhering to a standard American diet, and they're starting to, encompass our bad habits, and they're bringing that into their culture and into different countries, where they're starting to have this adaptation where they used to eat more, the farm to table style of foods, and now they're eating more of those processed foods, which once again means that they are lacking those key nutrients and the antioxidants coming from those superfoods, that now their diets are deficient or insufficient in that exposure to things that are going to actually enhance NRF2. So there's so much science behind it that it really is quite impressive, but we have to recognize that NRF2 is not, the mainstay to keeping us healthy, but it certainly needs to be valued as having this really important aspect of our overall health and the longevity, especially if we are chronically exposed to, different chemicals. So if we live in cities where we have higher amounts of air pollution, for example, these are the reasons why we want to trend our diets more towards those superfoods, those cruciferous vegetables that contain the power of sulforaphanes and indole-3 carbinol, for example, things that have been studied in the setting of different cancer research. For example, I've talked a lot about indole-3 carbinol and DIM, for example, that is coming from cruciferous vegetables. And we know that the Karmanos Cancer Institute up at Wayne State University in Michigan, they've done an extensive amount of research looking at all of those phytochemicals from those cruciferous vegetables and just how powerful those constituents can be at a cellular level, not only for fending off oxidative stress, that damage that's done, but also when we look at the enhancing ability that those active constituents can actually provide. And one of those ways that it's doing that is through that NRF2. So in the annuals of pharmacological toxicology, they were looking at the role of NRF2 in oxidative stress as well as toxicity, and understanding how the NRF2 basically can sense the overabundance of reactive oxygen species. And when we start to generate too many of those is really when we have to see that NRF2 go into its activation mode. And if we are not getting enough exposure from the key ways in which the body can obtain the things that will trip or activate NRF2, then that becomes a problem. And you can start to see that pattern of why we have a breakdown of systems. So, it can start with lack of antioxidants, lack of vitamins and minerals, lack of, healthy fats. And that's why across the board, we are impacting the body's ability to properly detoxify, the body's ability to properly fend off oxidative stress, the body's ability to properly ease inflammation. And all of this comes down to making sure that we are maintaining our diet and that we are incorporating in these good and powerful, healthy foods. And so when we think about things that can fall into that category, yes, we want to think about obviously seeds and nuts and green leafy vegetables and fruits, and in particular when we think about berries. But we also want to look towards things such as tea and the EGCG contained within green and white tea and black tea as well. And the black tea also has power of theaflavins. So say, for example, if you go to our website and you look at the green tea HX capsules, that's a really lovely blend of the power of EGCG coming from the green tea along with theaflavins coming from the black tea. But we want to make sure that we are covering all of our bases. And so superfoods in general are not just one particular food and, just an avocado is considered a superfood. No, there's many different foods that when we include them into our diet, all we are doing is helping to support the natural processes and regulation of those processes in the body to keep us healthy and to maintain that cellular integrity. And that's what the goal is at the end of the day. So you can certainly look at many of our superfoods that we have available, including the cocoa HX, the beets HX. I had mentioned the green tea. I always include that in there because certainly we know that green tea packs a big punch. The reds HX, the greens HX, a lot of different ways that you can incorporate these in. So say if your diet is actually lacking in many of these food sources, like in the whole food setting, then you certainly want to make sure that you are including into your supplementation routine things such as organic flax powder, including the beets HX, which also has tart cherry extract. A lot of the nutrients that have been shown to be these comprehensive superfoods. And I certainly encourage you to make sure that you are sticking with a regular routine, that you're not just trying to eat healthy 1 or 2 days out of the week, that it becomes a regular part of your everyday routine, that you are eating healthy every day, that you are taking the right nutrients on a regular basis to make sure that NRF2, this transcription factor, has the ability to do what we need it to do, which is to activate the transcription of over 500 different genes that play this integral role, not only in detoxifying our bodies, but in terms of targeting inflammation and for so many other ways in which it can help to keep us healthy throughout our lives. So that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health, and we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.